We are going to be looking at some disturbing videos, strange and odd news stories, and as always, let's go ahead and get right into today's video. So we are almost towards the end of 2025, and there has been a lot of crazy news stories, a lot of things have happened that we no longer talk about. But 2024 has had its share of crazy news stories as well, strange and mysterious news stories that I feel still to this day have no proper conclusion. Now, the very first strange news story of 2024 that we are going to go ahead and get into is the freighter that struck an object in Lake Superior.
A freighter carrying iron ore is taking on water in Lake Superior. The Coast Guard says the ship hit something underwater just before 7 o'clock this morning, about 35 miles southwest of Isle Royale, Michigan. That's an island closer to Minnesota near the U.S.-Canadian border. Half of the crew has been evacuated for safety. The ship is 689 feet long. It is now on its way to a port for inspection and repairs.
So what is so strange about this story? Because ships can sink, they can collide with things, that's not a conspiracy. But back on June of 2024, the United States Coast Guard received a report at 6:53 in the morning from the 689 Michipicoten that they collided with something underwater and are taking on water. And this was approximately 35 miles southwest of Isle Royale, Lake Superior. Where they were 35 miles out is a good distance. That would mean by that distance, Lake Superior would be very deep, rolling out any rocks. It is also very important to note that the crew on the Michipicoten were experienced, and they also used the word collided, which is very important, because the word collided is a nautical term meaning to strike a stationary object. Researching this further, Lake Superior is the world's largest freshwater lake. It also is the coldest and deepest of the Great Lakes with a maximum depth of 1,332 feet. Again, it's huge. The ship had departed from Two Harbors, Minnesota on Friday, bound for Thunder Bay in Canada, when it received a 13-foot gash shortly before 7 a.m. The crew was forced to use water pumps to displace the floodwater. Their actions managed to reduce the listing from 15 degrees to 5 degrees by 9:15 a.m. And still by that time, they were still using the word collided. They still believe they collided with a stationary object. The United States Coast Guard of the Great Lakes sent out this tweet, again confirming that the Michipicoten did indeed collide with a stationary object. The Michipicoten was carrying low-grade iron ore taconite, and as time progressed, the story would slowly change. But the very next day, that Saturday, the cause of the flooding was still unknown. By all accounts, they still cannot find the object that they smashed into that caused a 13-foot gash in the ship. Lauren Thomas, the Externals Affairs Division Chief for the 9th Coast Guard District, was quoted as saying that investigators will probe whether the hull was damaged by running aground, hitting a fixed or floating object, suffering a hull failure, or perhaps a combination of various factors. Even these news agencies started to notice that the story was slowly beginning to change because they would put in their articles earlier, the United States Coast Guard of the Great Lakes said that the ship had struck something underwater. What's even more curious is that there were articles that came out and there were a couple of interviews that came out that stated that the ship, before it made this collision, actually diverted off of its course. And then this was never expanded upon. There was no follow-ups as to why this ship had diverted.
That was a 1,000-foot ship that diverted off of its track.
As time was still progressing and the story was making its way around the airways and still yet no plausible answer, of course people are going to begin to speculate, and they did. The incident has sparked speculation online about the possible unidentified submerged object, the USO, the nautical equivalent of a UFO. Users on X posted various theories online, many of them tongue-in-cheek, as they discussed the incident. The water 35 miles southwest of Isle Royale is 600 feet deep. I wonder what the Michipicoten collided with underwater, one wrote. Another commentator responded, maybe Elon's rescue sub, referring to a submarine created by mogul Elon Musk. Another suggested the bottom of the lake was a watery graveyard for abandoned cars. So again, a lot of people were talking, coming up with different theories. News agencies were also interested in this story, sending emails out to the Coast Guard for further answers. And we can't forget that the Great Lakes also have a lot of mysteriousness and strangeness that surrounds them. A lot of odd stories come out of the Great Lakes. This story was also a couple months after the anomaly on Bouvet Island that kept appearing. You can see this news article here that says it's not the first time that a USO mystery has gripped ocean fans. In April, a wave modeling website suggested a huge underwater object was moving at incredible speeds alongside the African coast. There was also an object that kept appearing over Lake Michigan as well. As more time then progressed and there still wasn't any answers, this is where we started to hear something different. Lieutenant Joe Snyder of the United States Coast Guard came out and said an underwater collision still can't be 100% ruled out, but the gash in the ship's hull is likely due to a stress fracture. None of the crew members on the Michipicoten ever gave a public statement as to what happened. The only ones speaking on the subject were high up in the United States Coast Guard, and at that time the damaged Michipicoten was laid up at Kiefer Terminal in Thunder Bay. Investigators from the United States and Canada were trying to figure out what went wrong, and they were investigating it further, but still, to this day, there's never been an answer as to what happened to this ship. They say it's very likely that it was a stress fracture from the taconite, but they're not 100% sure, and if it did indeed hit something, they don't know what that something is or was. One would think that this experienced crew on the Michipicoten would know the difference between a stress fracture and colliding with a stationary object. With there being no concrete answers, and the way this story was swept under the rug and forgotten about, the crew members not being able to speak on the subject, a lot of people feel like the ship collided with a UFO, or perhaps an enemy submarine, or something else altogether that exists under Lake Superior that they don't want us to know actually exist. Because again, a couple weeks prior to this story, this massive object was seen on radar over Lake Michigan. So is it possible this same object traveled over to Lake Superior, or perhaps another one of these objects exists under Lake Superior, whatever this object could be? But here's something even more interesting. The Michipicoten may have collided with something, because it's never been confirmed, on June 8th, 2024. On that exact same day, 2 kayakers went missing on Lake Superior. That is right, very interesting coincidence. This article was published on June 8th, 2024, and it says, the search for 2 people who went missing Saturday afternoon, June 8th, after a boat capsized in Keweenaw Bay resumed Monday morning. The Michigan State Police says its Marine Services unit located the capsized boat and both missing people involved with it Monday afternoon. The victims were deceased and located in an area nearly 220 feet in depth in Lake Superior. No more came from this story either. Nobody knows what caused this boat to capsize. There was actually a fishing tournament taking place that same day, and the waters were fine. Only hours after the Michipicoten perhaps collided with something on Lake Superior, this boat capsizes and both people on board lose their lives. There is also something strange about this news story when it comes to the numerology as well, that makes me feel like there's something more at play here than meets the eye. On the Michipicoten itself, the ship, there were exactly 22 crew members. The 2 individuals that had capsized, well, there was 2 of them, and they were found exactly in 220 feet of water. What is up with all the 2s? And there have been no more updates to either story. Let us go ahead and move on with our next bizarre news story of 2024, and this would be the strange case of Kyle Effinger.
Officers found him unconscious inside the engine's intake cowling.
And that there was a medical emergency on the de-icing pad, and then the police showed up.
Across the tarmac, Nelson used her cell phone to zoom in on the body she saw lying underneath the engine.
As a nurse, I know what it looks like when people are doing compressions. When I looked out the window and I zoomed in, I could see somebody going up and down.
She says first responders did CPR for about 20 minutes.
They put his body into an ambulance, and the ambulance didn't drive away. And I know that if that happens, then they're no longer living.
She flies out of Salt Lake International often.
It's a big airport, and there's a lot of people coming in and out, and I don't know how they don't have more security breaches.
She calls the incident bizarre and said she's sorry for Effinger's family.
Kind of makes you wonder what happened.
This story is odd for a couple of reasons. For one, Kyle Effinger, 30, of Park City, passed away on New Year's Day after climbing into the turbine of an aircraft which was awaiting takeoff at Salt Lake City International Airport with 100 people on board. Now, the thing is, they say they found him inside the turbine, the engine of the plane. Now, if that was the case, they would not find anything left of Kyle Effinger. There have been many stories that have come out of maintenance workers being sucked into the engines into the turbine blades of the planes, and they are basically reduced to soup. They're that powerful. While any plane is waiting for takeoff, the engines are definitely on. So that being said, the question happens to be, how were police, investigators, and rescuers able to find Kyle Effinger's body in one piece and still alive when he basically should have been reduced to particles? This is the video footage that has come out of Kyle Effinger inside the airport acting very erratic. Now, prior to this, prior to him running out to the terminal, there was other news that had come out that people noticed that he was located in other terminals acting very erratic as well. So the question happens to be, where was security? So as you can see on the camera, you can see Kyle Effinger acting erratic, but what's even more interesting is towards the end, you can see the plane inching towards him as he's running on the tarmac, and that's where the camera stops. We never once see Kyle getting inside any plane's engine, or if this is the plane, and again, it's on and moving, he would have been just completely sucked up inside the engine and nothing left. But as you heard in the first news clip, this lady saw police working on him. She saw somebody down on the ground and he must have passed away inside the ambulance. We never actually see Effinger's family on video, but news tells us that, and they are quoting the family, Effinger's family believes the incident stemmed from a mental health crisis while he was about to fly to Denver to see his sick grandfather. He got held up in security, missed his flight, and those phone calls, I just knew it was coming on. They call it the manic phase. Those just don't end well for him, and this is Fox News quoting Judd Effinger, who would be Kyle's father. Kyle's father supposedly said, obviously, this one the worst ever. So the story concluded with Kyle Effinger was just mentally ill. But this New York Post article continues to say that Effinger was found partially inside a wing-mounted engine of the plane after the manager of an airport store reported a disturbance on the secured side of the terminal just before 10 p.m. that night. The Airbus A220-100 was being de-iced before flying to San Francisco, officials also said, which is odd because we just finished reading that Kyle's father said that Kyle was heading to Denver to be at his grandfather's funeral, and this is what was causing him to act erratic and go berserk inside this airport, and that he missed his flight and he ran onto the tarmac because he was late for this plane. But the article also suspiciously says its engines, the plane's engines, were rotating at the time Effinger was found, despite the airport initially reporting they were off. So again, how is he in the engine of the plane if the engines were on and the blades were rotating? Salt Lake City police and airport workers found personal items, including shoes and clothing, discarded on one of the runways. First responders pulled him out of the engine intake cowling, which directs air to the engine fan section, and tried life-saving measures, including administering Noxalone, but he was pronounced deceased at the scene. The medical examiner's office has yet to determine the exact cause and manner of how he passed away, along with the Federal Aviation Administration, the National Transportation Safety Board, and the Transportation Security Administration at that time were still investigating the security violation and how he passed away. And that was that. There have been absolutely no updates ever since, and we do not know exactly how Kyle passed away. Now, for those that have been subscribed to this channel for quite some time now, you will know that I have made plenty of videos when it comes to planes and people going berserk on planes. One of my theories is that airports, they are a big hub for trafficking, and some of these people may be given things to cause them to go insane just to be taken away and never seen or heard from again. And maybe Kyle was escaping some kind of situation and they caught up to him. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and link one of those videos in the comment section below, because I've spoken about a woman quite often on this channel, not Tiffany Gomas, but another woman who said she was being trafficked on her plane. And what's pretty bizarre about that video is that there has been no updates to her story as well. We don't even know her name. The next strange story that happened in 2024 wasn't a official news story, but it was still strange nonetheless. It involved a plane crash in Washington, D.C. that never happened. This is also very interesting timing now that I think about it, because this happened about 3 or 4 months before the Black Hawk crashed into the American Airlines plane in Washington, D.C. This first happened back on November of 2024. An individual on TikTok, he was recording the sky because he heard all the sirens, this noise, and he looked up in the sky and he saw a trail of smoke, which he believed may have been coming from a plane.
I do not know what's going on right now. I heard a noise. I come outside. There's sirens blaring, and I see this huge trail in the sky. It's midnight right now, and there's this huge trail like something crash landed. What the heck is that? What is this? I wonder if there's anything on the news about this.
Yo, am I tripping right? Okay, so I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. Please tell me if anybody saw this. But I was coming back from the gym off of this back road outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we're like, the road and the trees and the sky opens up. What the I swear I saw giant sparks, like a plane, like maybe on fire, or like, I don't know. But it was like, there was sparks across the sky, and it left like a huge, like, illuminated smoke trail, like, behind it for a long time. And then, like, 3 seconds later, the biggest aircraft I've ever seen in my life flies right over my truck, and it was completely silent, and it had like 4 flashing lights on it. What the fuck? And then now, like, right outside, I'm here for work, living in a hotel, and right outside my hotel, there's like 4 black undercover police officers just like posted up at an intersection. I don't know what the did I just see? Someone please tell me they saw this. This happened like 5 minutes ago, and I can't find anything on it. There's like no sirens, like, what the?
Now, around the same time that people said they saw something in North Carolina and also heard a crash in Washington, D.C., there was a heavy police presence in Washington, D.C. This is what was recorded. You're going to hear me talking in the video, but that's only because I was the only one talking about this on YouTube at the time. I have been staying up to date on this crash landing that occurred in both Washington, D.C., North Carolina, and I do believe Indiana as well. There's an individual who, in the Washington, D.C. area, heard something, but he also encountered a very heavy police presence. Now I'm going to go ahead and play his video, but something else interesting also occurred that involves the Washington, D.C. alerts, and I'm going to go ahead and show that after I play this gentleman's video, and I'm going to go ahead and play that video now.
Shh. It's early in the morning on the U.S. Capitol grounds, and man, security and law enforcement is everywhere. Walk with me. Look at this. What is going on? Have you ever seen something like this with Capitol Hill police? Man, everywhere. What's going on? And it's quiet, as if they're waiting for something, expecting something, preparing for something. Look over here. Let's walk over here. Come on, come on. Let's walk over here. Morning. You got all this? What's going on here? Let's go. Let's turn around and look at that again. Man, turn around and look at that. Let them see them. What's going on here? Oh, my. I'm going to figure, I mean, it's as if the entire law enforcement force is here early in the morning. I'll get back to you, okay? Something's going on. You got to do some research. I got to see if there's some threats. If there's something big going on in the nation's capital, I'll figure it out. Stand by.
So like I said, we're going to go ahead and go to Washington, D.C. alerts, and we're going to go ahead and look at 4:49 a.m. because something strange happened around that time. This alert says, alert MPD units are investigating a blank in the blank block of blank. Look out for do not take action. Call 911 with event number. Sent to 1st District, parentheses PSA 201-208. Alert DC sent by MPD CAD number reviewer. Even the CAD number is blank, which is odd. Taking a look at the other alerts on this page, you can see nothing else like this. No other alert is blank. You can even see the CAD number on these other alerts. So this one really stands out. What happened at 4:45 in the morning where they are withholding information? Not only is there a heavy police presence on ground, but we also know that there was this police helicopter that was flying over the vicinity of Washington, D.C. as well, making a few circles as if it was tracking something. Before we do get into another individual's video who also experienced something today in Washington, D.C., people are asking why have we not heard any updates from the news and media when it comes to this crash landing. Sometimes the news does not update until Monday, or something big could have definitely happened and they're sweeping it under the rug and trying to come up with some narrative. That's also possible as well. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and play this person's video who also, like I said, experienced something in Washington, D.C. as well.
Minutes out of Washington, D.C. right now, okay? And last night around 4 a.m., the weirdest fucking thing ever possibly happened to me. I've seen UFO crashes, okay? But I was so fucking confused at what I saw. I saw an aircraft that looked like it was just blazing to the ground. And I've never really seen an aircraft this fucking big. You feel me? When I tell you that this motherfucker was huge, and then not even 12 minutes after it just so happened to crash, I guess? I don't know. I heard a loud explosion. All I heard was a ton of police cars in the distance. And I mean a ton of police cars, okay? So I just so happened to go on TikTok because I'm like, I wonder if anybody else is talking about this right now. So I actually tagged him in the comments below. I want you to go check out his video. But that streak in the sky looked exactly like what he's showing in the video. It's weird, man. And there is a couple of people that are talking about the same thing happening in a couple different states. And I'm not sure whether or not to believe them, but there was a huge comet that was due to come across the night sky that hasn't been across the night sky in over 80,000 years, apparently, this weekend. So I find that kind of coincidental. Regardless, if there's anybody that just so happened to see anything in the DC area, please do comment below, okay?
Now that individual was Beauty Merc on TikTok, but there were also other people that said they also heard all these sirens and what sounded like a crash in Washington, D.C. And again, it's just so odd. This came only a couple months prior to the crash in Washington, D.C., the actual crash between the Black Hawk and the American Airlines plane. Oddly enough, this also happened a couple weeks before we started hearing all this stuff about drones and the drones over New Jersey, the drones and the orbs. News and media, they would never talk about this story or cover what happened, which is odd because anytime a group of people are talking about something on social media, whether it is true or not, the first thing they will do is release the fact checkers, and no fact checkers were ever released. And around the same time this was happening, people were also reporting they couldn't sleep or they were waking up exactly at around 3 a.m.
Because this crash landing DC thing is really bizarre. And is it affecting our sleep? What's going on? I'm on the East Coast and I went to bed at 10 and I woke up at 3 a.m. like it was time to wake up, even though I feel exhausted, but I'm wide awake. And I was on TikTok watching the guy in Raleigh in his car who saw something in the sky that had lights and had like this fiery tail. So I go to the comments expecting people to talk about what he saw, but there's like several people like, why are we all awake? And everyone was just like posting 15 minutes ago. So then I'm like, no, legitimately, like, why are we awake? And everyone was like, yeah, why are we awake? What is going on? Like, it's one thing to kind of like just be awake, but it kind of feels like I'm exhausted. Why am I awake? And why is everybody on the same page saying that? And evidently there's a video from a guy in DC that has like a smoke trail and he hears sirens and stuff. What's going on?
Around the same time that these reports are coming out that something crashed in Washington, D.C., there was a Metropolitan Police copter that was tracking something in Washington, D.C., and it was flying back and forth. You can see it circling around. So what exactly is going on here? There were never any news reports and never any fact checking. The only people talking about this were people on social media. And again, 4 months later, there was a real crash that happened in Washington, D.C. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're already subscribed, please like, as any engagement does help the channel grow. Once again, thank you so much for your support.